Quick, is it Berenstain Bears or Berenstein Bears? Does the Monopoly Man wear a monocle? Jiffy peanut butter or Jif? Odds are good you've misremembered those facts. Welcome to Truly Terrified, Paranormal versus Physics, where we talk about some really weird stuff, and Joe the Scientist explains how it's not possible, or maybe it is. I'm Lynn, and
I'm Joe.
The Mandela Effect theory was named after Nelson Mandela, who passed away in 2013. It's a peculiar phenomenon. Many vividly recall Mandela's death occurring in the 1980s while he was in prison, but he didn't die until 2013. And so anything that goes along with that, where you misremember something, they call it the Mandela Effect. And so his death isn't the only instance of that. Numerous dates, details, and historical events are frequently inaccurately remembered, which invites reflection on collective memory and the intricacies of human thought, because it's not just individuals. Whole groups of people will misremember some fact. Like those things I mentioned at the beginning, I'll tell you the answers at the end. But that is the exact same thing. It's going on all the time. But here's where I tie into our episode from last week about the Church of Satan. Back in the mid-1900s, that sounds like it was a million years ago, so 1960s to 1980s, there were a lot of cases reported in the news of horrific child abuse. Some of the most newsworthy had an element of paranormal about it, or at least it looked that way. People were reporting that their kids had been molested and abused at the hands of Satan worshipers. I'm not going to go into the details because they're too gross and too graphic and horrible, so I'm not going to go into that. But they were disgusting, and they were detailed disgusting.
The reports or the
stories that these children told of the abuse being done to them. Suffice it to say, those things did not happen. Even though the kids involved had distinct and clear, detailed memories of being abused in these absolutely specific and repulsive ways, it was proven that they hadn't been, or at least not in the ways that they said that they remembered. So false memories refer to a psychological phenomenon in which an individual remembers an event quite differently from its actual occurrence, or even recalls an event that never took place at all. It turned out with those children, people had, and I don't know why they began questioning them, but the caregivers and the teachers and the parents who questioned these kids asked them specific questions, detailed questions, which produced these false memories in the children so that they were able to recount these absolutely specific things that never even occurred.
It's pretty crazy that you can do that. I mean, your brain can do that, you know?
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Generate scenarios that it thought.
And it creates visual memories. It creates an actual real memory in your brain. So these differ from simple memory errors in two significant ways. First, individuals with a false memory are confident in their accuracy. They absolutely believe it. It's a memory. Secondly, false memories involve recalling events that never occurred rather than forgetting something that did happen. So if somebody says that never happened, that's not a false memory, that's forgetting. If somebody said, I rode a red bike to the park when I was 14, and they never did, that's a false memory. Whether it came from their sibling telling them about riding a red bike to the park, or having watched a movie.
Yeah, imagine all the people who've watched movie. I mean, if it's that easy, so you question somebody.
Yeah.
They say emotional reactions produce stronger memories.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're questioned and it's an emotional thing, you'll remember it more probably than if it's like you're just zoned out watching TV. But imagine if something is happening that makes you emotional while there's something on TV.
Right.
The two can get potentially conflated.
Right. There have been two cases in my life, one huge and one trivial, that really illustrates this. In the first case, this was way back in the 1990s, a friend of mine was sick and she had to go to the hospital, so she had her sister watch her children, and she had 4 younger children. The 2 oldest were off on their own. So the 4 younger children went with her sister, and 2 of them were twins, and then next thing my friend knows is that her children have been, she's lost custody of her children. And her children told stories of really horrible abuse at their mother's hands. And eventually she did get her children back. But it turned out that her sister had questioned these kids, giving them examples of things that would be abuse, and the kids built that into their memory, and that's what they said, and they said it in court, and they really believed it. And they probably still kind of believe it, you know? But my friend lost years with her children because of that. The second event is really trivial. I was talking to a person who I will not name and telling them in great detail with a lot of relish and excitement about an art process that I have used. And sometime later, a couple weeks or something, they told me about an art process they had used, and it was almost word for word what I'd told them. Now, if they'd used that art process, they would have mentioned it when I was having that conversation before.
Yeah.
But when they were speaking almost kind of vaguely, kind of like in a dream, like they were recalling a dream. It was really odd. And I thought, this is really bizarre.
I've experienced before where somebody is, I mean, I don't want to say lying or anything, but something's going in their brain to be generating what they're saying on the fly.
Right.
And it's like they'll say, it's almost like a generalization. They'll say they did it, but if you like took them into an interrogation chamber,
they wouldn't have specifics.
They couldn't say, oh no, I didn't actually do it, you know. But that's how they're referring to it beforehand.
Right. So those were two examples that I just gave, and what you just said is another example of kind of a trivial thing, like, you know, wrongly believing you ate breakfast when you didn't, or...
Have you ever had it where you remember something and then you realize, oh no, wait, that was just a dream?
Yes, that has happened to me. And in the worst situations, it's believing that somebody assaulted you who didn't assault you. And then you accuse them of assaulting you, you know. And that's when it goes, you know, criminal cases are based on that. Police know that even the eyewitness accounts of people that were at the scene of a crime or who believe they've been in a crime are not very reliable. They're just not, because memory is not very reliable.
It's funny, like people harp on like LLMs, like ChatGPT, whatever, quote unquote hallucinating. People do that a lot.
Yes.
You know? And it's I think, like in my experience, it seems relatively easy to get somebody to do it. Like I haven't intentionally done it, but you can just accidentally get people to like say, and I've experienced it myself where you're going on a chain of thought and you get to a point where it's like, well, this has to be right in order for what I'm saying to make sense. So it is right, but it's not.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And in my life, there have been lots of times my siblings get together with your brothers and sisters. They're telling stories of your childhood, and they tell them with emotion and with details. And you were there at that period of time. You weren't necessarily there when that event happened, but you can imagine it so thoroughly that then later I think, wait a minute, was I there? Did I see that? Was I part of that thing that happened? And I think it's really common. I know it's really common from everything I read. It's really super common and happening all the time. Our memories are built upon the most recent reference to the memory. So if you have a memory of riding a red bike to the park, and then somebody says, no, wait a minute, it was a Stingray red bike. Then in the future, when you remember riding a red bike to the park, it will be a Stingray red bike, even though you didn't remember that before, because somebody added that to it. You're always building. Memory is very fluid, very elastic. And
gradually you forget larger and larger details. You know, so like immediately it's like, oh, what was the texture of the wall like? You forget that. You never, you may have noticed it, but you forget it really quick.
Right.
But over time, it's like larger and larger things evaporate until it's like people's names and, but probably what's really happening is like what you said, the memories are being integrated together and are providing a foundation for more memories.
Yes.
And in order to do that, you're generalizing things that already happened to the point where they're useful, but not specifically meaningful anymore. Which is, I mean, it's a good thing. It's making room for new memories, literally. But on the other hand, you're forgetting particularities that you might want to remember. And like, more on topic, the fact that there is that interaction means you can't take any one memory in isolation of any other. You know what I mean?
Right. It all fits together somehow.
Yeah. And so in order to understand somebody's memory, you might have to understand it necessarily anything else in their life.
Yeah. So one of the ways you mentioned that you could probably make somebody have a false memory, and one of the ways that happens, probably not deliberately, is when somebody questions another person about an event that took place. Like in the case of those kids being questioned about some allegation of abuse, and they were questioned in detail, descriptive detail. So when the police question somebody, the event's already taken place. So you've already stored a certain amount of information about the event. And then they start asking you questions about it. So your brain is going back and taking the event out and examining it and trying to fit these other things in there. And your brain doesn't know. It just fits things together. And so you build these completely false memories, and they feel absolutely real. They're a real memory now. They feel absolutely real. When eyewitnesses are immediately questioned about an incident, their recollection of the event may be significantly altered due to the way they're even questioned. Leading questions they're designed to imply a particular response, like asking, "Did you see the man crossing the road?" Instead of saying, "Did you see anybody cross the road?" The person already knows it was a man crossing a road, and saying "the man crossing the road" implies that for sure it happened, not "did you see this," but "did you see this particular event when it occurred?" And so then they build a memory of it.
So it's kind of like cold reading, Or is that the right word for it?
Yeah.
So cold readings where you like look at a group of people or a person and you get pieces just off of little utterances, little questions. You get pieces that you can piece together for specific details. It's kind of like reverse cold reading. You're injecting small details.
Right, and then the person searches their memory for how that fits.
Exactly. So the fact that people have the ability to cold read indicates they potentially have just as much of an ability, so really impressive ability to receive information and integrate it.
There's actually a scale. It's called the Australian sheep-goat scale that measures how likely a person is to create false memories. Now, let me just tell you about why it's called the sheep-goat scale.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
If you are less likely to form false memories, you're a sheep, because Jesus was the shepherd. I swear to God, this is the truth.
Well, and it does make sense. You're shepherding people. It makes sense.
If you're more likely to create false memories, you're a goat. And it had something to do with the Bible too. Right there.
Oh, well, that doesn't make sense necessarily.
Right there, that pisses me off. And it's because you're assuming that the Bible isn't creating false memories every frickin' day.
Oh, yeah, true.
That the Bible is the ultimate reality and truth? No. That discounts a much greater proportion of people on the face of the earth who don't believe the Christian Bible. So that was my problem with that.
Well, so, there's a lot of cases where, like, science has, they take some terminology from old cultural practices, like, for instance, year zero is whatever
when Jesus was born.
And then you have AD and whatever. And now it's like, what do they call it? CE, Common Era.
They used to say
but
AD after death.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's actually specifically true, but that's what
I was taught in school. BC standing for before Christ.
Yeah. So, but we don't really think on that level.
I hope not. So let's get back to the Australian sheep-goat scale. So this is how they determine if somebody is more likely to create false memories, or, how likely they are to create false memories. The test, and I think I have this right, asks the person if they believe in some aspect of paranormal phenomena. Mm-hmm. So they ask, why are you acting like that's just normal? That's just funny. That's their scale, that's their criteria. So they ask them, for instance, do you believe in ghosts? And if they say, yeah, maybe, that might be one measurement. And if they say, oh, absolutely, I've seen them, then that would put them higher up on the scale.
That's funny, because if there really are ghosts, then it would completely invalidate.
Exactly. That's the thing that's ridiculous. One of the questions on it is, do you believe there are UFOs? What? Yes,
there really
of course there are UFOs.
Regardless if there's alien spacecraft, there are UFOs. So I think that's not a very good
I don't think so either. And they also use the question about ESP on there, if you believe in ESP. So the more someone believes in paranormal things, the more likely they are to create false memories. That's their rationale.
That is not a very good. I can't imagine people taking that very seriously.
It was in a scientific study. I looked up that.
So here's what I mean.
Read the
imagine if there's no paranormal stuff at all.
Okay.
You see a face in a window and you say, oh my God, it's a ghost. Well, no, it's not a false memory. It's not a ghost. It was a person standing in the window. So that provides a false positive for a false memory
maybe it has to do with your how you perceive things, like you jump to the conclusion that it's a ghost instead of determining whether there are footprints in the sand outside your window.
Imagine if there are no ghosts, but you live in a society where people say there are ghosts that can exist, and you see something that looks just like a ghost. Then you say, well, I didn't really believe in ghosts before, but man, that thing looked just like a ghost.
I think that this stems from the very beginning. They're making the assumption that, and I'm not discounting this, that all reports of paranormal activities are false memories, because these people absolutely believe it. Mm-hmm. I absolutely believe the experiences I've had. I believe that if somebody thinks that they were taken up into a UFO and experimented on, they absolutely believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there are people who are kooks that make up stuff, but so right there, their assumption is that anyone who believes in paranormal stuff, right off the bat, they're coming up with false memories.
But even then, so let's say you're having a dream that you were abducted by, that's not a false memory. It's a misattributed memory.
Yeah.
Like you think it actually happened, but you experienced it. It was in a dream.
Right.
So really that test is measuring... what it's actually measuring is all of those cases where somebody would say those things, which are really highly varied and probably do coincide in many cases with false memories.
Yeah.
But it's like, for instance, if you're trying to hit the bullseye, and the bullseye is your false memory measure, but you have a gun that's like shooting the whole wall. It's a lack of accuracy. So like your target group is in there, but it's not gonna give you accurate results.
I think as an author, and having spent years putting together stories and making descriptions compelling and trying to make the mundane seem more exciting, I think that there's a real danger of recounting things that have happened to me or around me in such a way that not that I'm lying, not that I'm embellishing it with untruths, but that I make it seem much more interesting, and then that starts something else in my brain so that I remember it differently. Because here's one story, I'm going to tell this story briefly because we only have a few more minutes. I was driving across Las Vegas. I'd been on an errand to go pick up some sort of supply for our office. I was driving back, and all of a sudden, I noticed that there is a bunch, like several, black SUVs with the kind of lights that they take out of their window and stick on top of the car with a magnet. Or maybe it was in the dash, but it was not like it was police cars. There were lights, flashing lights on it. coming up quickly behind me. And this is on a major street like Maryland Parkway or something in Las Vegas. So I pulled over as soon as I could, which was into a parking lot on the corner of that main street and another main street, and pulled to the edge of the parking lot. And they came around the corner, and there was this big moment where this car they were chasing, they blocked them in because these SUVs came from the other way and blocked this person in, and they all got out with guns drawn and, took down this person in this unassuming car right in front of me while I stood there next to my car in a parking lot. That really happened. I have not embellished that one bit, but it would be easy to tell that with enough relish and excitement and
to amplify it
and give somebody else the idea that they were there. And in fact, my brother, we were talking one time about weird things that had happened, and he said, "Now, did that happen to you, or was I there? Did that happen to me?" Because I told it to him with such detail and relish that he felt like he had been there.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important when you're going over the events of your life to not, no, you can't even say to not embellish it, because that's lovely.
That's what you do. But consider this: you tell the story, and it becomes, you're embellishing it just for flavor. But as you're doing that, you're re-encoding it each time.
You're changing your memory.
But you are actually like mutating it into a false memory.
I know. Isn't
where
that
it's like,
crazy?
okay, imagine like, you're on the highway and a cop pulls somebody over, and then a few decades down the line, it's like there was this huge chase and SWAT team members pitted a car off the road and.
Okay, so here's some of the advice that I read about. They said that if you want to remember something accurately, you should go over it as soon after it happened, like a monologue in your brain. Go over those details or even write them down so that you remember it accurately. Also, if you do that right before you go to bed, like if you've written it down and then before you go to bed you read that, you will remember it accurately because it will encode in your brain.
So do people who keep journals, like daily journals,
I
diaries,
think that
whatever,
probably helps them keep more accurate memories. Yeah.
Interesting. Because they also say if you write something down, your brain then remembers the location you wrote it down and not the memory itself.
Right, which is weird. Okay, so going back to the Mandela Effect, I have absolutely no idea. No one has absolutely any idea why vast numbers of people all around the globe believe that the Berenstain Bears were called the Berenstain Bears. No idea why. You could show people the covers of their books and they will pick the wrong one.
I think that there's probably like common, like just the way your brain works and everyone's brain works, that there's common errors that people make.
Okay, so why do people believe the Monopoly man wore a monocle?
Makes sense, right? He wears a top hat, right? And a suit.
Yes, but...
And he's a capitalist. He wears the... Oh, also, isn't there it's like another thing, round-headed character who does wear a monocle?
No. You're thinking of the Monopoly man. He does not wear a monocle, but you remember him wearing a monocle.
Is it the chips? What is it? The ones that come in a canister.
I know which ones.
Little plastic lid, and whatever those are called. Doesn't that? I'm thinking of that. I think I'm morphing two different characters.
I don't know, but I'm going to search for a round-headed guy that wears a monocle.
I absolutely can see how people get. I don't want to say mixed up with that, but they've added an element that just makes sense. So imagine you have in your brain, you've learned of certain types of characters, and it makes it easier for you to then characterize other characters lalah.
Maybe it's a morphing between Mr. Magoo, who had one eye squinted, I think.
No, I'm thinking of like.
Okay, so there's Mr. Monopoly Man, no monocle.
Wait a second, what's that?
Who the hell's that? I don't know. He looks evil, though.
Look up the ones
looks like the
with
Hat Man.
the chips. I don't know what they're called. Pringles.
Pringles?
I think they're called Pringles. and I have no clue. Maybe the Pringles guy does not
I don't know that there is a
I think his
Pringles
head
guy.
is actually a chip. I'm not sure.
Anyone remember the Pringles dude having a monocle like the Monopoly guy?
Does he? He doesn't?
They put monocles on everybody. Now I have no idea. I don't think he wears a monocle. I don't think he wears a monocle.
No, he does wear a monocle. He does wear a monocle. The peanut guy, what's his name? Or what's the brand?
I don't know. No, there's the Pringles man. No monocle.
You're right. He does. The Pringles guy does not have a monocle.
No, he does not.
The peanut guy, he 100% has a monocle. That's true. That's the real, he really does wear a monocle. That's probably what I'm thinking of. Maybe. Clearly, human memories aren't very good.
Oh my gosh. Mr. Peanut. Yeah, he wore a monocle.
He does wear a monocle.
Mr. Peanut. Let me find what.
He must, obviously, he had
for
the cane.
Planters. Mr. Peanut.
It's Planters?
Who is the advertising logo and mascot of Planters, the American snack food company owned by Hormel, is an anthropomorphic peanut.
He's a peanut.
He wears formal clothing of an old-fashioned gentleman with a top hat, monocle, white gloves, and spats. He is the one who wears the monocle.
Yeah, okay. So you can see, now he is a peanut, but...
and wears a hat. Okay, Jif peanut butter, not Jiffy. It's Jif peanut butter. But
Jif, yeah, that's
I've known lots of people who called it Jiffy, and I just thought,
consider,
it's just like, a nickname.
There's the word Jiffy in a Jiffy. Mm-hmm. Makes sense, I think.
It does make sense. Jif doesn't really make sense.
So in their brains, there was two concepts that were very close, and then like bubbles, they eventually formed into one.
Yeah. Okay, so to go over that, the Monopoly man does not wear a monocle. It's the peanut guy from Planters Peanuts. The Berenstain Bears were popular kids' book characters. It was not Berenstein, it was Berenstain. Jif peanut butter has been a staple in households for decades. Be careful how you talk about your memories because you are rebuilding your memories at any given moment.
Those two bears, the one taller bear.
Yogi and
I think
Boo-boo.
so. And it's like what they wear or something.
I think they wear shirts. I don't think they wear any pants.
Yeah, but it's like people think, what they don't wear clothes or something. Okay. Or they do, or he wears like a little tie or something.
Bear and Boo Boo. I think it's Boo Boo.
Yeah, I think so.
Neither of them wear any clothes. They wear collars and ties.
Okay, yeah. That seems to be what I remember. Which is funny because it's like little details like that. Why would you remember it? It has no bearing on anything. Why would you need to remember that?
Yeah. Our contact information is in the show notes. You can email us, text us, or even call and leave a 3-minute voicemail. And as always, if you have a story you want to tell, send it to us. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and never be so terrified you can't run.